Alrighty, what's going on, everyone? Thank you for tuning into another live stream. I am trying out this new software, Restream.io, to stream both on YouTube and Twitch. So it's the first time trying it out. I was like, oh, let me give it a shot. So I'm trying to figure out how, because I created the event ahead of time on YouTube, but then when I went through the Restream.io, it created a separate event. So now YouTube is showing two events, but it seems like Twitch is only showing one event. So I'm trying to really quickly see what's going on there and see what I can do. Maybe I can't do anything at this point, but in the future, I guess just have to schedule and create everything through Restream.io and not actually make anything on YouTube beforehand. So I'm trying to bring the information from the description over from the one I created over to the one that should be actually live right now. And then I got to check the chat as well and see if I can bring the chat over from YouTube. But if you're watching, you can always throw something in the chat. Let me know if you can hear me. Let me know if everything is working properly. And then we can get started with our form check. So I think the thumbnail is updated and I made the other one private. Now let me see if I can grab the chat out of the other one real quick. Let's see if this works. And then we'll be able to get started. So let me update this YouTube chat on the screen. And I see John saying loud and clear, so I'm glad you can hear me. There we go. Now it's showing up on there. And then let's see if I can get this. One more thing going is that I can pull then the comments into the actual live stream. So if I bring this over, hopefully, how do I bring the Twitch link over? I've never used Twitch before, so I'm trying to figure out how to grab the chat out of Twitch. I've done it before on YouTube, so that one I know how to do. Let's see if this works. So now I should be able to pull in. There you go. I can pull in John's comment right there. Let's see if we can make him bigger as well. There we go. So now if you guys have any comments or any questions or anything like that, I should be able to pull them up in here and then we can always review them that way. So thanks for helping me out, John. At least it seems most of the stuff that I wanted to get should be updated now, as far as the thumbnail should be over, the description should be over, and then the chat should be over, so that way I can provide information to you all as far as what's going on. So it looks like everything is good now. So what we're trying to do is a form check, and I'm doing it based on the videos that were posted in our Discord channel on the positions of power. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to drop the link as well. So let me grab a link to Discord. So if anyone wants to join, let's copy this bad boy and let's throw this into YouTube. And let's see if we can also throw it into Discord, or sorry, in Twitch. So now, if you're on YouTube or you're on Twitch and you go to that link, you can join our Discord channel. We have, let me bring this over so you guys can see. So you can see we have, a section just for general chat. We have a section here for anything as far as our My Strength Book app, the Position Power app. If people have questions, we have a whole King of the Lifts section. If you want to talk anything about the podcast, like, previous podcasts or talking about upcoming podcasts, anything you guys want to see in the future, you can throw that in there. We have a channel for programming, and then I created this channel here for the form check. So the plan is, going forward, is people will throw stuff in here and we'll help them obviously through, replies here in text, which you can see there, but also from time to time we can do a live YouTube like this, and we can have me or other coaches on there as well, breaking stuff down so that everyone can kind of get maybe a better picture as far as visually seeing what's going on, rather than just, text form, which can make it a little bit more difficult in order to understand some things. So let's see. Let me turn down my sound for when we pull up these videos, and then let's start going through these videos. So let me get the message out of the way. So let's start off with our very first video here, sent from Ayuma for bench press. He's got a heavy set here and then a back off set here, mentioning that he thinks his rack height is a little bit too high, threw off his scapular positioning. And then here also, he's saying for the set of 5 and for the set of 2, he felt like his RPE 7. So we'll check his RPE a little bit and go over the rack height and overall technique. So let's take a look. And so when you're looking at as far as rack height, you can kind of already tell here. You can already kind of tell here that the arms are pretty much completely extended, completely stretched out, and he still needs to, at that point, raise and go over the clips. So it already looks like it's going to be too high unless he brings his shoulders, further forward to be able to get him a little bit more space. But at this distance right here, it already looks like it's going to be too high. So now you can see as he goes to unrack it, how it barely has to get over it. And then after, you can see after he brings it over, you'll see sometimes with lifters, then they settle in, squeezing the shoulder blades and getting the position they want. And if we go back a little bit before he starts, you can see how the bar is actually lower than the top of this clip. So what I'm looking at here as far as the rack height is that the top of the clip here, okay, and then the end of the bar here. So you can see that it's too high of a rack height for him. So he needs to drop it at least 1, but I would say maybe start off with 2, okay, so that way he can actually test out being like, enough below the rack height with the bar, so the bar can come out and he doesn't have to round his shoulders forward and then try and squeeze the shoulder blades down and get in position after you unrack the weight. He wants to try and get as much of a correct position and shoulder blade squeeze together and everything like that before you have the load on top of you. It's much more difficult on a squat and bench press while you have a max load on you to then go and get in the position you want. You'd rather try and get in as good of a position as you can possibly get before you unrack it. And then if you have to make some minor adjustments as far as putting your hips down or getting your feet tight, that's fine. So I would say you should at least drop it 2 down to rack height 6 and test that out and see if he can have a little bit more bend in the elbow as he's setting up, and then be able to bring it out at the full arm length and already be in this position. So then we go into the actual bench here, and let's go into the bottom position. The bottom position looks really solid here as far as he uses a wider grip here, touching lower on the pecs, close to the upper abs. You can see the elbows are tucked in where they're stacked under. And maybe it's the camera angle here. And you might have to do a top-down view or maybe a direct side view. But what it looks like maybe here is this arm is tucking in more. And that's why it looks like the arm, is angled that way a little bit, versus this one seems like it's a little bit more of a vertical and maybe angled, flared out a little bit more. So maybe something to look into there, that this one looks like he's tucked in more, but it could just be that camera angle. So if he films from the top, like if you have someone stand on the little lift-off foot blocks and film down, then you can see the position of the elbows and then the straightness of the bar from the top down. The other option is, if he doesn't have anyone, is to set up a tripod here, like the center of the bench, but coming a few feet away so you can see the full picture, and filming in this direction towards the top of his head to then be able to see kind of the profile of the arms and see whether both elbows are in tucked correctly the same, or whether one's out and the other one is tucked in more. But as far as the grip width, the bar position in the wrist, the touch point, everything there looks good. It's just figuring out whether there's some kind of asymmetries there and whether it's worth fixing. And then There's our first rep, and then here's our second rep. Second rep looks pretty solid as far as speed still. Like there isn't much slowdown here. Okay, you have a little bit of a shaking in the arms, but that really not really a slowdown off the chest, then speed up into lockout. So RP 7, maybe 7.5 looks good. It depends for this lifter, you know, how much they can grind it out, how much their technique breaks down as they get closer to RP 8, 9, and 10 to figure out what the true RP is for the lifter. But for me, from a third person's perspective, just looking in, looks like, you know, a 7, maybe a 7.5. And as far as the actual bar path and pressing back towards the shoulders, everything there looks good as well. Pushes back over the shoulder joint as he goes to lock out. Really good bench press there. So let's go now to the set of 5 here. So now we get a little bit of a different angle. Still, it's going to be hard to see whether there's some kind of asymmetry going on here because it looks like the torso is going to be blocking that other arm. But again, here you can see how much he has to unrack over the hooks and then drop the shoulders down in place. So you can see how long the arms have to be and raised up over his head, which is going to pull the shoulders, you know, up towards the ears, and then he has to unrack it, and then here start bringing it down and start pulling the shoulder blades down and also away from the ears towards his hips over here. So again, bringing down the rack height, testing it out at a lower position, and then maybe working the way back up would be beneficial here. From here, you can see the feet are slipping a little bit too. So depending on, you know, if your carpet gets, you know, dirty as far as dirt and chalk and sweat and baby powder and stuff like that, you may have to make sure, like, you know, if you're at a commercial gym, a lot of people are using it, make sure like you're cleaning off the area. And same thing with the bottom of your shoes. If you're walking around, if you have some shoes, flatter shoes like this, like deadlift shoes or wrestling shoes, oftentimes they don't have a lot of deep grooves like a cross training shoe or a running shoe. So the grip that it does have, the rubber grip, and then the small grooves it does have, if it starts filling in with dirt and baby powder and stuff like that, it can get slippery. So oftentimes that's why you see in a competition when people are going to deadlift, they have a little wet towel. So you wipe off all that dirt and everything like that, and then you dry it off, and then your rubber is very grippy again. So this might be something as well to look into, is whether the carpet or the shoes are grippy, or if he's just losing tension. Okay, you want to be focusing on driving the entire time. Some people focus on, you know, kind of being loose once the bar touches the chest, and then when they go to press, they think that's the point where they have to start driving the legs. But you want to be maintaining tightness the whole time, so you want to be driving the legs the whole time. So if we draw in here again, okay, so when you have your shoulder blades digging down into the bench, and obviously the weight's pushing down through the arms into the bench, this is going to give you an anchor point of this weight to stop your shoulders from sliding up the bench. Okay, plus you chalk your back if you need to give you more friction and better grip so that you don't slide. So that anchors this side of the arch. Then to anchor this side of the arch, you need to be driving these legs the entire time. So if you're pushing your toes through the front of your shoes, that's going to send, you know, the opposite force here. It's going to try and extend the knees. And if you're squeezing your glutes too, you'll be trying to extend the hips. And that's what's going to anchor this point here from sliding out this way. So you're countering your arch, like the ends of a bridge are being anchored in at the edges to maintain that bridge. And so you're anchoring these two ends over here to make sure you don't slip and lose that arch. So he does have some slipping going on over here. Let's see if it's going to let me, there we go, just do it that way. So he's got some feet slipping over here. So we just look at the feet again. You can see how he has to readjust. So you want to make sure that you have a good grip between the shoes and the ground so that you can push the entire time and you're not relaxing and adjusting your feet between reps. Again, you don't want to be making changes, preferably into your position or trying to get into the position you want while you're underneath a load. You'd rather get the position that you want, okay, before you actually start the lift, and not changing between reps, because as he's moving his feet, he may be losing a little bit of tightness. He may be losing a little bit of his arch. He may be losing a little bit of that shoulder tightness as he does that. And so then the next reps are going to feel a little bit different. And let's see if he makes any adjustments again as the reps go again. Looks like maybe it was just between the first and second rep. So maybe he has to just focus on getting in the position that he wants to be in on that first rep so he doesn't have to make any kind of adjustment after the first rep. The other thing we can see here, let me see if I can do it while it's paused. So let's see if we can go back a little bit. You can see how big this chest is right here. Okay, how much he's arching, how much he's pulling the shoulder blades back, how much he's pulling the chest towards the ceiling. So if we draw on this again, you can see how nice big of an arch he has here. All right, digging those shoulder blades in, pulling that chest up towards the ceiling. And you can see how big this rib cage has gotten over here. And you can also see that the hips are pretty far as extended and engaging the glutes. But what you'll see as he presses, he'll lose some of this position. The chest will collapse a little bit, the arch will collapse. So if we go over here and let me see if I can try and just move a little bit forward in the timeline, you can see right there, that position there versus this position there. You can see how much bigger he's pulling everything in the position on the descent. But then when he presses, the weight is collapsing his arch and making him lose his position. So obviously, one, we don't want to change position during the press. And two, he's making himself less efficient, making the lift more difficult as he's pressing. Because now you're changing the angle of the pec fibers, okay? And you're changing your range of motion some. And you're just, the position moving can be, unstable on the bench. So you want to try and avoid that. He wants to try and keep this position right here the entire time. So you have a stable base that you're pressing from. You have the same range of motion for within a rep and throughout rep to rep within a set. And you have the same angle that those fibers are in as they're pressing. So if we play this again and you just watch the chest now, you can see how big it is. And then right there, it collapses a little bit. Here he pulls it back up and then collapses a little bit again. So I want to try and keep that breath in the belly and keep that chest up the entire time. And typically there's two ways of when it comes to breathing and bracing for the bench press. One, which I personally prefer, is to hold the breath the entire rep. Maintain this position, keep that chest up, keep that rib cage expanded, hold the entire time until you finish the rep. And then once you finish the rep, you can take a new breath, reset, do your next rep. Some people, when they've gone far enough, like let's say 3/4 of the way or 80%, 90%, whatever for you, and you know for sure you have the rep, then they start letting some air out. But if you start letting your air out too soon during the actual lift, then again, you may be changing your position and you may, think you have the rep and then you let too much air out, you loosen a little bit, you lose the position, and then you miss the lift. So I would like to see him keep this position the entire time and not start letting the air out. The air's starting to come out right there. And same thing with the hips. I would like to keep the hips engaged, keeping that hip extended, keeping the arch big on this side, keeping the legs driven the whole time, rather than relaxing the hips and then pressing the hips up. Relaxing the hips, pressing the hips up. So you can see right there how he's pressing, once he feels like it's difficult for him. And then looking at the RP real quick again for this final rep. I think this one's the final rep. That one looked a little bit slower to me compared to the previous set. As you can see some more shaking here in the elbows. And you can see it's a little bit more difficult off the chest. So he's getting closer to an RP 8 on the set of 5 compared to the set of 2. So I think I responded to him there as well. So here you can see I said the double looks RP 7, but maybe a 7.5 for the set of 5 because it looked a little bit more difficult. It looked like he struggled a little bit more off the chest. The arms were shaking a little bit more. So as far as an RP, I thought the double was easier, closer to a 7. The set of 5 were a little bit more difficult. And it could have maybe been more difficult because he was losing the position as the rep was going along, because as the reps were going along in the set, because the leg drive and then the hips relaxing and the chest collapsing a little bit makes him less and less efficient for the later reps. So Mikey over here saying any preference for toes forward versus outwards for leg drive. I don't necessarily have a preference. It just depends on the person. It depends on how tall they are and where they can fit their legs. It can depend on how flexible they are and how much they're able to arch. So for someone who maybe can arch a lot, they're going to be able to pull their feet back a lot more. And if they're going to pull their feet back a lot more, they may want to push their toes outward a little bit as well to be able to get the feet back further and be able to have the ankle range of motion in order to get it back as far as possible. And also they can focus a little bit on pushing the knees out. So there's different ways that you can try and force yourself into full hip extension so that your butt doesn't come off the bench no matter how hard you try. And one thing is to bring the knees below the hips as much as possible to get the hips extended as much as possible. Another thing, obviously, focusing more on horizontal leg drive rather than vertical. But the other thing too that you can do is trying to force your knees out just like you would in a squat or deadlift. And that will help as well to keep the hips down and not let the butt come up. So sometimes it helps to have the toes point out a little bit if you're pulling the feet really far back, to also push the knees out a little bit, get a little bit more active that way, and be able to keep the butt down. If you're someone who doesn't have, as good of an arch, and let's say your shins are more of a 90-degree angle, you can probably have your toes more forward. Because if you just have your legs straight down, 90-degree angle at the knee joint, then you don't necessarily have to point the feet out, and you may feel more comfortable with the toes just pointed straight and just think about pushing back up the bench. All right, and then there are some people that do, a little bit more of a different technique where they might have their feet, way out in front of them and have the shins angled the other way. In that case too, they might like having the toes more forward. I think Sean Noriega does that. I think maybe Ryan Stin was messing around with that as well. So we can always go and see how pointed forward Sean's toes are, but I feel like he is pretty far forward because he just has his legs out in front of him, and then at that point he doesn't have to have the toes pointed out to the sides and driving the knees out to the side. So let's see if we can find a good angle for his bench. Might have to check one of the secondary videos, but maybe on this one we can see. Yeah, hard to tell, but it looks like it's fairly forward there. But you'd have to mess around and see what fits for you. As far as like your limb lengths and where you're trying to position your feet and whether you want to drive the knees out to the side, those kinds of things. Yeah, I can't seem to find one where we can see his feet very well. And let me take a look real quick at Ryan Stin if he's still doing that kind of style or if he's doing more of a feet out wide style, just to show you guys a different example. People got to show their feet more in their bench press videos. It's making it difficult to find. Let's see if we can see anything from this one. So this one looks like he's doing more of a tucked in and toes pointed out so he can drive his knees out. So that's what some people do, is trying to pull back as far as possible and then pointing the feet out a little bit in order to be able to get the feet in that position as far as ankle mobility, and then be able to drive the knees out to the sides in order to have less chance of the hips coming up. And this one looks like he's even doing more of an extreme toes pointed out. So maybe he was doing that before. Maybe I'm thinking of someone else. Sorry, Mike, I don't have a good example for you. But we will move on to our next video here. So we got Vaniori over here with deadlift. So he's doing 222.5 for 3 reps, and he wants a form check and RP check. So let's see if we can open this directly on Imager. And then let's see if we can full screen this. Let's see if we can go back a little bit. Take a look at what we got here. So overall, just like the bench press, I mean, there's really solid technique. Just little things that can be worked on here. So one thing to look at is this starting position. It's going to be a little bit hard to see with the little play button in the way. But we want to try and get the knees, if possible, in line with the toes, like with the second and third toe. So it looks like it's ever so slightly in. So if he can focus on driving those knees out a little bit more and making sure he has his glutes engaged as much as possible, driving out the knees in line with the toes as much as possible, it may give him some more space to actually bring the hips closer to the bar and maybe even get a little bit more upright. It could be just like a mobility issue that the hips are locking up, and so the femur's kind of forcing the knee to collapse in, because as we play it, he does a better job of driving the knees out as he's actually initiating the pull. So as we start going forward a little bit, you can see right here, it looks like it's a better stacking of the knees over the toes. So it could be that in that bottom position, he has some difficulty. Let's see if we can go forward again. So here it looks better. So it's possible that in this bottom position, things are just locking up and the knees have to come in. The other thing we can note here too, that maybe this adjustment will then fix that issue, is with both the conventional and the sumo, you want to have, as best as you can, the bar over the middle of your foot. So you want to try and have the bar over the middle of your foot and not out over the toes. And the more you go out over the toes, aside from it being more difficult and potentially putting more stress on lower back and everything, is you're not going to have as a vertical of a bar path. You're going to have a little bit of a sweep in. So instead of having his bar path, if we had a side profile being vertical, what's going to happen is when he has a little bit forward, is it starts like, let's say here, and then curves in and then comes up. Or if someone has like an extreme issue, it may be more of like a L shape and then up. So you can see, if we look at the shin angle, you can see how it starts shifting back right there. So he has the shins maybe a little bit too far forward, the bar a little bit too far forward, and so then the bar swings back a little bit, the shins shift back a little bit, and then that allows him to get into a higher hip position and then have the knees out better. So the other potential issue could be that he's sitting down just a little bit too much, and then the shin angles forward, which pushes the bar forward, and then also that's making it difficult for him to engage the hips properly, and the femur's locking up in the hip joint and the knees collapsing in. So if he gets more of a vertical shin and the hips a little bit higher, then potentially you can get the knees out in the proper position and the bar over the midfoot. So you can see that little bit of a swing back in the shins on each of the reps. And so the other way you can potentially see it too, you probably see it better from a side view, is the hips don't shoot up too much, but they kind of shift back and a little bit up as well. So he's trying to start in this hip position right here. And then if we go a little bit forward, and he may need to be starting kind of there. So a lot of people try and, turn the deadlift into a squat. They try and sit down a little bit too much. They try and have a vertical torso because they see like some elite level deadlifter who has a vertical torso and they feel like they should also have a vertical torso. But if you're not built the same way as them as far as limb lengths, especially the arm length, then you're not going to be in the same position as them. And so the hips aren't shooting completely vertically up, but he has this little bit of a movement where the hips and the shins are shifting back and then the hips are coming up a little bit. Right there. So he may need to focus on getting the bar over the midfoot, having the hips a little bit higher, having the torso tipped over a little bit more, and then keeping those knees out in line with the toes. The other thing you can see here, which Jason actually mentioned in the chat, is people who use straps have to be careful about how they wrap the straps around the bar and do their reps, and how they estimate any kind of max using straps to a competition where they're going to be doing hook grip or mixed grip. Because you can see how low this is in the fingers. You can even see that it looks to be like a little bit of gap here between the palm and the bar. So it's not even like his hands are around and then using the straps. It's like it's dangling, okay, from the fingers, and the straps are what's holding in place. But if you had to do this with a hook grip, I mean, you're not going to be able to get the hook around with the finger just dangling like that. And even with a mixed grip, you're not going to have much strength there. So what he's kind of doing is like cheating the rep a little bit, because you're cheating the starting position by artificially lengthening your arm, which can get you more of a upright torso. And then he's cheating the finish position because now he's having a lower lockout. So now he can lock out lower on his legs, and it's less work because now he's in a better starting position and a shorter range of motion. Then those lifters go to a competition where they have to do hook grip or mixed grip, and now they have to grip it fully. And that little bit of a difference of moving the bar up, okay, from the fingers into more of the middle of the hand or maybe deeper in the palm, depending on how they grip. Now it's going to change their starting position. They're going to have to bend over a little bit more. And then it's going to be a little more difficult in order to lock out because they have to pull further and they're not used to it. And so the estimation of what you're capable of doesn't always match up. So something to be careful of here. So if we kind of go forward as well for the lockout, let's see if we can pause in the right spot. So how low it is here and how low it is in the fingers is not what's going to actually happen when they do hook grip or mixed grip. In this case, I believe he said he does hook grip. So it's going to be a little bit higher, and also has to be careful about the shoulder. So sometimes when you do hook grip with a narrow grip, like, you know, either arms vertical or even a little bit further in more narrow, or when you do straps, is that people also then sometimes cheat their lockout and not bring the shoulders completely back. So if we go back here and let's just watch the video again from the beginning, is we want to make sure the shoulders get back. So that one looked good. That one looked good. It's this one that looks a little bit more iffy. Okay, and with hook grip, then you may have more trouble getting that shoulder back and maybe get called on it. So you'll see this with a lot of people that are very well built for deadlift and they have a low lockout and they do hook grip, is sometimes it'll be difficult for them to get the shoulder back because they're so, you know, tight in their position as far as having the arms vertical or even inwards a little bit and having the hook, and then the bar is so low on their legs and it's pulling them forward, it's difficult for them to finish and get those shoulders back. So another thing just to be careful of, and you can see the difference too from this angle, and you may be able to notice it more from a front, is you can see the difference, at least from this side angle, that this shoulder looks to be further back and then this shoulder looks to be further forward. So if you were a side referee sitting in this position looking, you may look and say, okay, you know, the lifter, the shoulder from the right side from the judge's view, it looks like it's back. The left shoulder does not look like it's back. So just some minor things to be mindful of here is just maybe slight improvement in the starting position as far as making sure the bars are the midfoot, making sure the shins as vertical as possible, not sitting down the hips too much. You want to make sure you have tension in those hamstrings. And then making sure that you do some big pulls with whatever grip you're going to use in a competition so that you can make sure you're doing your technique properly with hook grip or mixed grip, whatever one you use, and you're estimating off of those top sets properly. If you're doing a lot of reps and you're using the straps, it's okay, but maybe also want to make sure you're putting the bar in a proper position and you're only using the straps to not have grip being the limiting factor or pain from hook grip being the limiting factor. But you don't want to then use the straps to change your position and make yourself more efficient than what you would be without the straps as far as the starting position and the overall range of motion. And then also just being mindful of the lockout position is with the straps, sometimes it's difficult to grip the bar properly because they're kind of sitting in the straps. And if you're not gripping the bar properly, it can be difficult to get the lats in the position you want. And then also maybe because you're so loose in the arms and the lats and everything like that, the shoulders may be rounded over more difficult to get the lats back I mean the shoulders back into position and properly locked out. Let's take a look at the RPE as well. So that looked pretty easy, other than, he had a little bit of a bounce on that final rep, like getting his hips through and shoulders back. So you can see it came up easy, and then he had to, like, continue to stay with it as the bar was bouncing to get the shoulders back. So it makes it a little bit more difficult, but still look pretty easy, depending on how much he can grind it out. Maybe a 7.5. I don't think I put it at 8 yet, because I would probably see it a little bit slower off the ground for sumo deadlift in order to be an RP 8. It's getting on the verge there, so maybe a 7.5. Since I don't know the lifter and I've never seen him max out or do anything else other than this one set, it makes it a little bit more difficult. So I would say maybe 7.5 for now. And then if I saw more lifts and saw more data points, then maybe you can see, okay, maybe that is an 8 for them, and maybe they do struggle, at the lockout with getting those hips through and having that low bounce issue. So we got another question here. How often should I test my PR? My friends are trying to hit like every few weeks, but I don't know what's effective or safe. Yeah, I mean, it depends on what your goals are. If you're trying to just have fun and, max out in the gym with your buddies all the time. But if your focus is on what's effective and what's safe, then you'd want to max out less, because a true 1 rep max, especially if you're doing it on squat, bench press, and deadlift, is going to take a lot out of you. It's going to take a lot out of you physically, but also mentally, and just, like, drain you. So a lot of times people after a competition will just feel beat up, even though you're only doing 9 attempts versus, like, if you're doing a full training session of 5 sets of 5, you're going to be doing 25 reps on squat, maybe 25 reps on bench press, maybe some accessory work, but people feel a lot more beat up because of how high the intensity is and how close to failure, or maybe even failing, will beat up your body. And so oftentimes too, people don't get injured, in the couple weeks leading up to a competition. They also don't get injured during the competition when they're maxing out. They may get injured after the competition, okay, when the body's trying to recover from maxing out and all the physical and mental drains. If they go back into the gym too soon and they start pushing it too much when their body's in a weakened state, then that's when they can go and, like, tweak something on a lighter weight and injure themselves. And even as far as, like, your immune system, like when you do a hard training session and you damage the muscles and you destroy your body, your immune system actually gets a little bit weakened until it can recover and stuff like that. So just in general, whenever you do a really hard training session, or you do a max out, or if you're like someone who ran a marathon and you run a marathon, you do something that's extreme, okay, your body is going to get in a weakened state, it's going to be damaged, and it needs time to recover and get back to a more normal state. So as far as maxing out, you want to try and minimize it throughout the year and not be doing it every few weeks, because if you're doing it, let's say, once a month or even once every 3 weeks, then after you max out, you kind of have to get right back into training and push your body again to get ready for the next max out, especially if you're trying to do better and better. So doing that over and over again every 2, 3, or 4 weeks, it's stacking up. You're risking, one, not progressing as much, and two, potentially putting yourself in a position where you could tweak something. Whereas if you spread it out more, like a lot of people do 12-week, 16-week, or 20-week cycles, then if you're doing, let's say, a 20-week cycle, you're only maxing out maybe 2 times a year. If you're doing a 16-week cycle, maybe you're maxing out 3 times a year. And oftentimes for competitive powerlifters, you'll see they'll only compete, 2 to 3 times a year. Maybe someone who's coming up will do a local competition, qualify for nationals, go do the national competition, and depending on what they do at nationals, let's say you make the team for worlds, you go compete at worlds, and then you're done for the year. Or if you don't make worlds, maybe you go do like a invitational, like the Arnold Sports Festival or some kind of other local meet as your third meet, and then that's it for the year. Some people may do some additional ones, like some people may push it more if you're like a raw and equipped and do 4 competitions, or maybe you do a bench only, something like that. But the more and more you push it, 5 times, 6 times, 7 times, then you're hindering the ability to do more training cycles and build your strength, and potentially, putting yourself in a more compromised position in order to injure yourself. So most people, as far as competitive powerlifters that are focusing on what's effective and what's safe, you'll see 2 to 3 competitions a year, where they're pushing their body to the max. The rest of the time is focusing on training and building their strength rather than testing their strength. So if you're maxing out with your buddies every single month, it may be fun. You may get some progress for some time, but I wouldn't put it as effective or safe. If they want to go and max out every few weeks or every month, let them do it. Instead, you should train while they're maxing out. And then, maybe towards the end of the year, let's say in December, you want to hit some end of the year goals. Then you come and max out with them and you'll make way more progress than them. And then they'll be like, oh man, maybe he's doing something right over there. Maybe Kaz knows something that we don't know. And so then maybe they'll change their mindset as well. All right, Kaz has another question here. What is an ideal or average squat, bench, and Delaf ratio? Like I squat 110, bench 75, and 140. Is that a balanced ratio? So it's difficult to know what would be a balanced ratio because it can vary on a lot of different variables, whether like how competitive the person is, whether they filled out their body as far as how tall they are and putting on as much muscle mass, depending on their limb lengths. Okay, so if you have longer arms, it may be more difficult to bench press. If you have shorter arms, it might be easier to bench press. On the flip side, the shorter arms may make it more difficult to deadlift. Depending on past injuries, like someone came to football and let's say they have an ACL injury, then maybe their squat's going to be weaker. Or if you're someone who tore a rotator cuff in your shoulder, maybe your bench is weaker. So there's all these different variables that are going to change what someone is capable of. So asking okay, what's a balanced ratio for you? Who knows? It depends on how long you've been training, how much muscle mass you have, what kind of past injuries you have, what limb lengths you have as far as your femurs and then your arms, whether you've been training each of the lifts the same amount of time, or whether you've been training bench press for 10 years and squat and deadlift for 1 year, whether you like training one lift more often and you push it harder. So there's lots of stuff like that. And so I would say also, don't worry so much about a balanced ratio, because the sometimes I wonder what's the person's reasoning for, okay, what's a balanced ratio? What are they going to do next? So if you told someone, in your case, let's say we said, okay, your bench press is weak. What's the next move in order to build the bench press? Are you going to purposely train the squat and deadlift less and hold it back or make it even weaker so you can bring your bench press up and say, okay, now I'm balanced, but my squat and deadlift are weaker now? I would say most people would not do that. Most people would want to build up their squat, their bench press, and deadlift as much as possible. Not just focusing, okay, I'm going to make one strong, and I don't care if the other ones go to crap. So if you're trying to build all three of them as much as possible so you can maximize strength on all three in your total, then it doesn't matter what the ratio is and which one you're stronger at, which one you're weaker at, because you want to be focusing on building all of them. So that's why I get a little bit confused with that question too. I think there's a site. that I can pull up for you guys that may show some information. Let me see if I can find it real quick, where someone took all the data from OpenIPF for all the weight classes, and I believe they looked at the individual lifts as well to see what kind of population breakdown there is for it. Let me see real quick if I can find it. It just gives you a little bit of an idea, but again, I wouldn't recommend necessarily going off of this and saying, okay, now I'm going to try and build up my bench press and purposely hold my squat and deadlift back, because why would you want to purposely hold your squat and deadlift back? So if we go here, you can see here basically all the data points, and this is based on squat for classic men and showing in a 12 months time how much they can progress. And you can see it's all used off of OpenIPF. So if we go here to ratio, okay, now the ratio is going to depend on what your age is. So let's just say you're 25, and then you have to put in your numbers. So in this case, for someone who is 25 years old and is a male and is raw, you can see how in this case the deadlift would be higher up than average, and then the bench press will be just below, and the squat would be just below. But you're still in a good position here. 17. So let's see if we switch this to 17, if it makes any major differences or not. So it doesn't make a major difference here. So realistically, you'd want to be inside this orange line, because that, it's not an exact point. There's a range. And you can see, your bench press is like basically right in that range. The deadlift is just above, and then the squat is just below. So like, again, then from this point you say, okay, well, I'm weak at the squat and I'm strong at the deadlift. So how are you going to change your program? Are you going to purposely do less deadlifts and do more squats? But then what if your squat pushes up too high and then your deadlift goes back down, and then you have to go back and switch? So it's like this whole back and forth. So that's why I just focus on trying to build all the lifts. But if you want to mess around with this, let me throw this link in the chat here as well. And we can throw it in Twitch as well. And so you can always go and mess around with this if you want. And this is for, competitive powerlifters at all levels, from local level to the world championship. So it depends on whether you care about being a powerlifter specifically, or if you're also focusing on other goals, like maybe you want to bring up your overhead press, maybe you want to bring up your vertical jump, maybe you want to improve your body fat and put on more muscle. So then you have all these different goals, and it's like, oh, do you really want to focus on bringing your squat up because it's the weakest one of the three, but you're holding back on your other goals? So Mike, yeah, threw the website in there, so hopefully you can go and check it out. This guy is a powerlifter from Costa Rica. So I met him at some of our North American championships, and he's talked to me about some. And I told him about the Open Powerlifting website years ago, and he went and collected all the data, and he's trying to do all this research on there. So he's building out this app more and more. So he's always adding in things in there. So first, what he was trying to do is, like, if you can predict how much someone should be progressing in 1 year. So if I go over here to total, and let's just go, say 93 kilo class, open, and let's say your total was 400, and you want to see if you can get to 450. So again, these aren't exact numbers, there's a range to this, but if you see that red dashed line, you can see the red dot is above the red dashed line. So going from 400 to 450 kilos in your total in 1 year would actually be above what is the trend line. So an average person would actually progress less than that. So let's go like 430. So you can see 430 is a little bit lower, maybe 435. So someone who's like a 93 kilo lifter with a 400 kilo max should expect to get to a 435 kilo max in 12 months time. Now there's obviously a lot of factors to that, because the data points he's using is from competitions. So someone in a competition may have passed on certain attempts because they were just trying to qualify. Some people may have missed more attempts because they're trying to like win a world title, and so their total is actually lower than what they were capable of that day. So there's different stuff like that, but this just gives you an idea. So if like someone, thinks they're going to go from, let's say, a 400 kilo total to a 600 kilo total, well, it looks like maybe there was one person who almost did that. So do you think you're the person who has the, the programming, the technique, the hard work, and the genetics to be someone who can put 200 kilos on your total in 12 months time? It's not likely. And so you can do the same thing for different levels. So if you're like a 650, or let's go even bigger, let's go 750, and let's say you want to get to 800, then you can see again 800 is being a little bit aggressive, so you'd be above average progress there. And so you might be more around even less than that, 765. So you might, at that point, you're such an elite level lifter that you might only be putting 15 kilos on your total in 12 months time, compared to the beginner lifter that's putting 35 kilos on their total in 12 months time. So cool little website. I threw it in the chat so you can go check it out. You can mess around with squat, bench press, deadlift, total, your ratio, classic men and classic women. He's going to be looking into putting equipped in there eventually. It's just a lot of, as far as putting the data in, checking the data, breaking it down into all this stuff, and building all this out. So might be something cool over time that people can use to kind of like estimate, like if they want to set goals for themselves. Looks like it doesn't have a homepage as the homepage, But like if you're a lifter, you want to set a goal for yourself, maybe you can use this as a guide to see if your goals are reasonable or not. As a coach, you can also go and check the goals of a lifter and show them, hey, like, you know, based on previous data points from thousands and thousands of lifters, your goals are maybe too high or too low or in line. You can also see if you're consider most athletes are super strong athletes. So these are like the, you know, the genetic outliers. These are like the Amanda Lawrences, the Russell Orhis, and everything like that that break the trend line. And the less data points you have, the more and more difficult it is to predict the progress. So if you're in this range here, it's going to be easier to predict the progress based on, you know, hundreds and hundreds of people. Versus if you're here, it's very difficult to predict the progress because you're basing off of 2 or 3 data points in history. But just something to look at breakdown of each lift, the total, and then if you do want to look at the ratio, this is based on the population, so you can see kind of where you fall within the population. So if I put in, let's see, I was like 20, trying to remember when my best total was and how old I was. I think I was around 24. And I forget if I did 140, I think, and 260, I think. Actually, I was 27. So here you can see for my example how my deadlift was like, you know, in the range, just barely above. Squat was right in the range, just barely above. But bench is pretty low, getting, you know, poverty level, which makes sense. My bench has always been weak, always difficult for me to bring on my bench press. So I kind of already knew that from the beginning. My bench press was weak. But again, I was focused on a total, and I wasn't gonna, like, you know, take time off of squat and deadlift to put an extra 5 pounds on my bench press. I'd rather just push all the numbers, and if I'm getting, like, you know, 10 pounds on squat, 10 pounds on deadlift, and 0 on bench press, that's still a win for me. Yep, no problem, dude. Hopefully that helps you with your questions, and hopefully if you want to mess around with the website, you can mess around with it. I just wouldn't put too much weight on it, changing, like, you know, your entire goals and thought process, your programming and stuff like that, just because your red dot's a little bit lower than what's average. So let me see if we have any other videos here. Oh, we do have Mikey's video. Let's take a look at that one. We got another strap boy over here. So a little bit similar to the last one, as far as Mike, you might be trying to sit your hips down a little bit too low, pushing the shins a little bit forward, and you can see the hips kind of shift up a little bit. And so you can see right there, you're starting to shift back. So kind of like right there, you can see that shift back. So again, you want to be mindful of where your bar is in relation to your midfoot if you're over your toes too much. And then you want to be mindful of not having the shins angle forward too much, especially in the sumo. And then the bar has to go forward. And also your bar path may not be vertical depending on how long it takes you to straighten out your legs. So if your shins are angled forward a lot, then the bar obviously can't go through your shins and have a vertical bar path. So either you have to straighten out your legs really fast, and that's why you see people, especially with conventional, where their hips shoot up a ton and they turn into more like a stiff leg deadlift, or the bar has to kind of go around your legs. So sometimes you see people's bar drift forward and go around because they're angled a little bit too much. So in your case, it seems like everything kind of shifts back a little bit, and then you're able to have from here a vertical bar path. And then the other thing, oftentimes when you bring the bar down, this is why stance conventional, not sumo. For me, I don't designate people saying, oh, it's a wide stance conventional, oh, it's a frog stance sumo, or it's a narrow sumo. To me, if your hands are inside your legs, it's a sumo. If your hands are outside your legs, it's conventional. So if you're professional strongman and you got a wide stance conventional with your hands outside, it's still conventional to me. But in either case, okay, because oftentimes where your hands are in relation to your legs, you're going to move your stance with and then your toes and everything like that. So in any case, it looks like you're sitting it down a little bit too much. And one thing you can do is when you bring the bar back down, oftentimes it's difficult to find the correct starting position from the bottom. But as you bring the bar back down, if you control it and kind of reverse the motion, you naturally go into the correct starting position. Even when you bring it down fast, a lot of times some people fall in a natural starting position or pretty close to it. But if you went down slow and you control it for a few seconds, you would naturally go down the right spot. And as soon as the weights touch the ground, boom, you just stop right there. And that would be a good starting position for you. So here, as we start playing a little bit and you're going back down, boom, right there is a pretty solid starting position for you as far as the hip height, okay? And then from there, the shin angle is pretty good, maybe just pushing them out a little bit. Obviously, pulling the shoulders up and getting tight. But this is kind of where your hips should be. But as we start playing it, okay, you start bringing them down a little bit, and then you do your whole little setup where you bring the hips up, and then you start slowly moving the bar forward. And then now look how much lower you're trying to start your hips. So you're really trying to get, down into a squat here where you're almost trying to get your femur parallel to the ground, okay? And then trying to get your torso to vertical and your arms to vertical, whereas your hips should kind of be where my cursor is, okay? And then as we start playing it, you can see how the hips come up and kind of come back into that position right there. So the weights haven't left the ground yet right here. All you've been doing is pulling the slack out of the bar, and then your hips naturally go in the proper position, and now you're pretty much back to, as it breaks the ground, you're back to where the cursor is. So again, I would be careful about sitting down too far and then having the bar forward. So your starting position here is maybe a little bit too far ahead because it looks like the weights have broken the ground, but you'd be more in this position here. So if we draw on here, I don't know why my buttons went over to the other screen, but you can see here how vertical your shins are. It's angled back a little bit, but pretty vertical. Bad drawing there with my trackpad. But let's try this again, if it lets me. So pretty vertical here, and you can see how the hips are higher than the knees. Okay, so you don't have that parallel femur. And then really solid torso angle here, really solid neutral spine here. And then you can see from the shoulder joint, the arms angle back slightly. So we don't have vertical arms. We want the arms angle back. And then if we were able to, see your shoulder blades here, okay, the shoulder blades are going to be directly above the bar as well. So not the best drawing, but this is a good position for you. And the bar is pretty close to your shins if you were standing straight up, and the bar is over the middle of your foot. So that's the position I would recommend right there, and not this position here where you're trying to pull from, where you're really angled forward and your weight's forward, and what happens as you pull is everything shifts back. And then as far as the pauses, that pause looked good. If I'm watching the second one again, I think it was maybe a little bit rushed. So that one, I would say maybe your pause was a little bit rushed too. You kind of pulled, and then your pause wasn't very tight and very long, and so the weights kind of dipped down on you, and then you kind of use that again. So it depends on how long you're trying to pause. But personally, I like to make it very obvious, like if I'm doing a pause squat or a pause deadlift, very obvious that the bar is completely stopped for time. Okay, maybe 1 full second, maybe 2 full seconds, and then explode up, rather than like a quick slowdown right there and then going. Because I think it kind of defeats some of the purposes of the pause deadlift. Is one, you want to come to a full stop in that difficult position or difficult range of motion, and from that dead stop explode through to lockout. The other thing is you want to spend more time under tension in that position and strengthen those muscles. So the more time you can spend, obviously to a limit, you don't want to go extreme and do a 10-second pause deadlift. Then you're going to get some more benefits out of it if you do like a full 1 second, full 2 second stop. And then the other thing is obviously it's going to make it more difficult. So some people will naturally slow down their pauses or not pause at all just so they can do more weight. So I like to keep the weight lighter. For a lot of my lifters, I'll start with like, 60% and really focus on coming to a complete stop, holding it for a full 1 or 2 seconds and then exploding rather than just like quick little slow down, the bar dips, and then you go. Deeper than my squat. I didn't want to say that, Mike, but since you said it, we'll we'll go on to your squat too. The problem with the squat video, I was kind of trolling you, and I guess maybe you're kind of trolling me back, is that it's so far away. It's from here, it's very difficult to get an idea, especially it's not a direct side view, and it's not probably where the side referees were sitting. If I was the head judge, okay, in your direct front view, or let's say the head judge was this view, I'd probably give you a white light. But from the side view, it may tell a different story. So obviously I didn't stop it exactly at the right point, but like from here, on this leg here, it's nearly impossible to see where your hip crease is because there's the shading and stuff like that. We don't know how deep your thighs going down and how deep the hip crease is. And then here on this side, maybe we can see where the top of your knee is, but again, we can't really see the hip crease because your torso is in the way. But just kind of looking at this here, just looking at the top of the thigh, it does look like the top of the thigh is a little bit flat or maybe angled up. So there's potential there that if the thigh is angled up and then comes back down to where your hip crease is, that you may be right at parallel and you didn't dip it down. But, the flip side is a lot of people try and look, not even just talking about your squat, but just in general, a lot of people would try and look at the bottom of the leg and be like, oh, look how deep the hamstring looks, or look how deep the hips are going down. Or they may look at, if you can see the hamstrings on the knees, on the calves, they'll be like, oh, look, the hamstrings are hitting the calves. Like, how could that not be the depth? But they're looking at the wrong part, I think. I think people should be looking more at where the top of the knee is, and then looking at where the hip is, or trying to guess where that hip is. So they should be looking at that top surface. Again, really difficult for me to draw here and be able to see anything like that, but they should be looking at these points here rather than trying to look at some kind of point here or some kind of point here. And when we play this just live, let me see if just looking at it how it looks. It's tough. It looks like maybe your hips locked up a little bit on you, and then you went, like, as soon as your hips locked up, you went up. And even when you did start going up, you can see also you lost your position, your torso somewhere. You lost your bracing, and you started extending your spine and pulling that chest up. So here, maybe your hips locked up, and then you started coming up when you weren't ready for it. And then here you can start losing the bracing, and then you're starting to have the elbow shoot up and, hyperextend a little bit. 9 red light master. Yeah, again, for me, I mean, obviously I'm not in the chair, so I don't know what that person can see from the slight angle. But if I was like dead center or this camera angle and I was the head, I would probably give you a white, because for me, it needs to be 100% certain that you're high for me to give the red. But if I was on the side and I could see the hip crease better and maybe I saw that was parallel, then obviously I would give it a red light. And the other thing too is I'll hop onto your Instagram, since you didn't give me a good side view or a close-up view. And we'll see if we can pull up one of your recent ones real quick to kind of show you what I'm seeing, which is why I'm picking on you. Let's do this one because maybe the color contrast is better. So I didn't get it perfect. Let me see if I can try one more time to get a better shot of the bottom. So like that doesn't look that great to me. Even with this lighting, you can't see perfectly where the hip crease is here, But like, the knee, a lot of people will try and take like the top of the knee sleeve. Some people will try and think about the middle of the quad. I try and go from the back first. So I look at where the crease of the sleeve is and where the crease of the back of the knee is, and kind of come up there and see, okay, that's probably where the kneecap is, because obviously where the bend is going to go right into your kneecap. So then the top of your knee is going to be obviously above that kneecap and maybe somewhere there. Okay, so then from there, if we go across, okay, let's just assume that your camera's all set up perfectly and everything like that, is, you can see how your quad is kind of angled up like this. So we don't want to be there. We want to be somewhere more here. Okay, and then we have to just try and figure out where your hip crease is, which we can't tell. But I would say maybe you're somewhere in this range here. So again, to me, this looks like it's high. So some people might look at it and be like, oh, look at the hamstring touching the calf, like look how deep they are. Or they may be looking at the top of the quad instead or something like that. And I'm looking at this from the side view. I'm saying, okay, even though it looks like your hips are fairly low to the ground and it looks like your torso is tipped over, it looks like your hamstring are touching your calves, it still looks high. And part of that probably is difficulty to drive the knees out. So as your knees start coming in, it makes it harder for you to continue to drop your hips and they kind of lock up on you. And so that's probably part of the issue going on here. And you can even see your shoes kind of cave inward a little bit. And so this looks high to me. And just the way you're built just can make it difficult for you to get down with a low bar position, and you have to really sink yourself down in there. Let's see if we have a close-up front view. Let's see if we can take a look at this one. So unfortunately, the knee's blocked here. I was trying to see how much you push the knees out to the side. But you got your rack blocking you there. But I think you get the idea, is like even your training squats right now look questionable at best, and maybe even high, like based on what I drew. And so you're going to have to focus on dipping those hips down further. You may have to focus on building up the ankle range of motion some more, so that the ankles don't collapse in and make it more difficult for you to get down, because then the hips lock up. And then you won't be a 9 red light master. Let me see what else you got in here. The forward knee angle messes up there. My most recent, I think, is better. All right, let me go take a look at your most recent, good sir. Yeah, like without even pausing it, I see it can look better. Just if you look at the hips, you can see how the hips start tucking a little bit. So pretty much everyone, in order to get below parallel, is going to have the hips tucking under a little bit. I know everyone's against butt wink and all that stuff like that. It's not always necessarily butt wink. It can just be the glutes are getting so stretched out that it looks here in your shirt right there that you kind of like had your hips tuck under you a little bit. And so usually when I see that, that's a good sign the person's really trying to get themselves down into depth. Just like the way the lighting is here on the shorts, it's still hard to see the hip crease here. But again, your knee's probably somewhere around here. And then if we go across, it looks better, but really, yeah, it's difficult to see. Really difficult to see where you are in here. But it still looks, definitely better, but potentially a little bit questionable still. But I can see how you're definitely trying, and you're seeing that tucking under of you trying to get down and break parallel. Like that one too. And so you actually lost a little bit of tightness with how fast you went down, and the hips kind of tucked under you a little bit. So keep that up and see if you can continue focusing on getting that. And you then you get some white lights. And you can see as well, if we just look at how your knees are going forward, like at this point, you're done with your ankle range of motion. So your knees aren't going forward anymore. At this point, your knees are in place and then your hips are just going down. So you really have to, at this point, force your hips down and break that parallel. Or you have to continue to focus on ankle mobility or do some kind of change as far as your stance width and that kind of stuff. So let's see if we have anything else in here. Vaniori's got a squat in here as well, so let's check that out. For form check 170.5 for 6 reps and RPE. See how long we've been on this stream as well. 54 minutes. So maybe we'll make this the actually hour 15, sorry, just updated. We'll see if we make this the last one. Let's see if there's anything else. Since that was posted today, maybe we'll save this for next one. Let's just take a look at Vaniori's squat here. You know, I gotta eat lunch at some point, and then I got a video call with someone at 7 p.m. So can't stay on here all day. No problem, Mike. Keep working on it. It looks like it's getting better. Then we won't have any problems in the next meet. So let's take a look at this one real quick live, and then we'll see how the entire set looks and the RPE. So overall, the walkout was pretty good. Maybe just a little bit of a hiccup. And let's take a look at the actual squat here. Actual squat's looking pretty solid as well. A little bit of the heels coming up. Let's see if this is the last rep. Let's see the RPE. Oh, we lost it. So I don't think we got the last rep. He left this hanging. Let's go over the setup and walkout real quick though, and then we'll maybe guesstimate the RP. So here, you know, pretty good position as far as getting a low bar position, the feet being narrow, you know, getting a nice unrack from the hooks, setting up 1 step, 2 step. That last step just seemed a little bit weird. I'm not sure if that's something the lifter normally does, but it's like they set up that foot correctly and then they really bent the knee and hopped over the other side. So that was a little bit weird. But other than that, you know, good position right here. As far as, you know, bar position, the elbow position, stance looks fairly normal. Toe angle looks fairly normal. Takes a big breath here to brace. Pulls the elbows down to contract the lats. Here in the bottom position, you know, really good position as far as letting the knees track forward. Looks like depth is pretty solid right here. And then really good bottom position as far as the neutral spine, keeping the elbows kind of the same angle as the torso and keeping the head in a good position here. And in this rep, you know, looks good as far as the feet staying down. It was later in reps that the heels started coming up a little bit, but at least for this rep, really solid. And then as we start coming up, knees shift back a little bit, looks like. And knees come in a little bit and back a little bit, but even here, pretty solid position as far as the torso angle didn't tip over too much or anything like that. And then here, taking time at the top to get a new brace. Again, depth looking good. The thing that I would be careful of that, you know, I used to do it too, and a lot of my lifters do it too, and I'd always try and stop it, is that, let me see if I can pause the right spot. So here, when he takes his breath in and braces and everything like that, you can see this is a really good position as far as squeezing the shoulder blades together, pulling everything down, creating a nice shelf, everything like that. So at that point, I'd rather him hold this position. But what he does is bring the elbows forward a lot, like I said, that's what I used to do, especially when it gets difficult. And a lot of people do is cueing the elbows forward too much. And as you're doing that and you're rotating here at the shoulder, is you lose a little bit of that arch or a little bit of that base. So as he starts bringing the elbows more and more forward, then he doesn't have that base of the shelf of the rear delts for the bar to sit on, rather than keeping that position and having that bar sit in that position and just keeping everything frozen in place and just focusing on doing the actual squat. So if I try and pause it, hopefully in the right spot that I want for the right. So here you can see kind of like the shelf is almost completely gone because he's pushed the elbows more forward. The only reason the bar is sitting there is because obviously he's tipped over a little bit. If he was more upright, the bar could potentially roll, and potentially it's moving in the hands. So sometimes you really have to use the hands and the wrists to hold that bar and stop it from rolling back, which can then put stress on the wrists and the forearms and elbows or anything like that. So I would try maybe not move the elbows as much and be moving the shoulder blade position throughout the set rather than hold in that position right there with the elbows being in line with the torso. And then it's more of a cue. Okay, if you have the tendency to shoot your elbow up, then the cue is to drive the elbows down. But if you're good at keeping the elbows down, then you shouldn't be trying to drive them excessively forward. If anything, you should be trying squeezing them together. So maybe a better cue for this lifter and some people is instead thinking about squeezing these elbows in together to try and touch behind the back. So thinking about squeezing those elbows together will kind of keep that chest up, keep those shoulder blades squeezed in, keep those lats tight, and then kind of stop them from driving the elbows forward and losing that position. And then let's take a look at so that rep right there, you can see the heels starting to come up. So it could just be, trying to maintain the balance and the descent speed. As the rep's going along and you're fatiguing, you don't want to try and go down too fast, dive bomb a little bit. The hips kind of push the knees and the shins forward, and then the heels start coming up. But overall, really solid set here, really solid technique. That's the one where he really went forward and went up on the toes and the heels kind of came up. So it's just, taking your time as the set gets more difficult, taking your time at the top, breathing, bracing, getting tight, maintain the descent speed, maintaining the depth, and not having the descent speed be faster and tightness be less, and then have some kind of position like this where the hips and everything gets shifted forward onto the toes, and then the heels are coming up. And then for whatever reason, we don't get to see that last rep, it looks like. But if we try and go to, let's see if that was the last rep. Yeah, so let's take a look at this rep again. That still looks pretty speedy. So maybe RP 7 or 7.5. It didn't look like RP 8, like, kind of like an opener would be. Maybe a 7.5. So maybe the final rep would be like an 8. But for whatever reason, I'm not sure why it's not showing it. And there you can see more of the weight going onto the toes and the heels coming up. So we'll stop there as far as the videos from yesterday, and we'll leave this next one here for next time. And then if anyone else wants to get in on this, like I said, you can join the Discord. The link is in the chat at the top. I can always drop it in again. And it should be down in the description below as well for the YouTube, and I think maybe for Twitch as well. But if you hop into our Discord, then you can come over and join the team. join the form check, throw your videos in here. You can see, people using Imager to put their videos in if they're too big. If they're not too big, then you can just upload them straight to the Discord. And then you can also use YouTube or something else as well if you want. That way we can, blow up full screen and take a look at pausing it and drawing on everything like that, compared to if you do it on Instagram and stuff like that, it's not quite as good. But you can join. Let me see if I can switch my camera over. So you can join us in Discord, do your form check, do your RP checks. You can help each other out. So other people are commenting in there, giving their RP or their thoughts. So you can also come in there, help other people out, have other people help you out, ask questions as far as programming as well. Ask questions as far as King of Lifts, who you want to see on King of Lifts going forward, what do you want to see as far as the fantasy league going forward. Talk about previous guests that were on and what you thought about everything like that, and join our community. But I'm gonna stop it here since we're already over an hour, and we will once again more videos in there. We'll do another live stream like this and help you all out. So hopefully you guys enjoy it, and I'll catch you guys next time.